They say the deepest human desire is to be understood. But I've learned those who crave understanding the most are the easiest to dismantle. When you want to be understood, you stop being silent. You start explaining, defending, confessing. You give people the blueprint to your mind and call it honesty. But it's not honesty. It's exposure. I used to explain everything. Why I acted a certain way. Why I was quiet. Why I withdrew. Every word felt like proof of my humanity. But people don't listen to understand. They listen to define. And once they define you, you stop being a mystery. You become predictable, replaceable, controlled. The compulsion to be understood is not a virtue. It's a vulnerability. The world reads your explanations like a code book. Every justification you give reveals a weakness, an insecurity, a trigger, a desire. And those who study you long enough will know exactly how to move you. Machiavelli warned that the one who reveals his intentions invites interference. The man who exposes his inner workings hands over his power before the war even begins. From birth, you're conditioned to seek recognition. The child cries to be noticed. The adult explains to be accepted. Every layer of your identity is built on the illusion that being understood equals safety, but it doesn't. It equals visibility, and visibility is vulnerability. You explain because you fear being misjudged. You defend because you can't stand being seen incorrectly. But those who are truly powerful have already accepted this. Most people will never understand you, and that is your advantage. When people misunderstand you, they underestimate you, and underestimation is the perfect camouflage. The more you try to be understood, the more you expose your internal code, how you think, what you value, what hurts you. The world doesn't reward that. It uses it. Manipulators don't need truth. They need patterns. And you hand them patterns every time you try to make them see you clearly. The ones who dominate quietly never explain their logic. They don't clarify their silence. They don't justify their distance. They let people guess. And every guess becomes confusion, respect, or fear, all of which create control. Starve the compulsion. Every time you feel the urge to explain yourself, pause. Let the discomfort eat at you. Let the misunderstanding linger. In that moment, you reclaim control. The silence becomes your armor. You'll realize that being misunderstood doesn't destroy you. It frees you. Wear mystery as a strategy. Your image doesn't need to be accurate. It needs to be useful. Let people misinterpret your motives if it maintains your leverage. When others can't decode you, they must respect the unknown. They hesitate. They assume. And assumptions are far weaker than knowledge. Replace the need to be understood with the need to be effective. Every move, every word, every silence. Measure it by utility, not emotion. Ask yourself, does this make me powerful or predictable? If it makes you predictable, cut it. You don't owe anyone your clarity. Clarity is for those who serve. Ambiguity is for those who lead. Machiavelli advised that a ruler should never seek love through understanding, but fear through distance. Understanding human nature doesn't mean you must expose your own. The most dangerous man is not the one who hides. It's the one who lets others believe they've seen him. So stop trying to be understood. Stop begging for comprehension. The moment you do, you stop being a person others can define and start becoming a force they can't explain. They told you honesty builds connection, but they never told you what it destroys. It destroys leverage. It destroys mystery. It destroys fear. Radical transparency is a luxury only the powerless believe in, because when you show everything, you give away everything, especially your control. There is no power in being fully seen, only exposure, only precision targets for anyone watching closely enough. From an early age, they teach you to open up, to trust, to be real. But no one explains that full transparency turns you into a readable pattern, a human diagram of triggers, needs, and blind spots. In friendships, you confess to bond. In relationships, you reveal to feel safe. At work, you overshare to feel human. And each time, you believe you're building closeness. But most people are not here to understand you. They are here to observe you. And what's observed is cataloged. What's cataloged is controlled. Your backstory becomes context. Your fears become leverage. Your preferences become buttons to push. Transparency doesn't create connection. It creates a strategy manual for someone else. Ask yourself, when was the last time someone used your truth to protect you? Now ask when it was used to manage you, to guilt you, to pressure you, to contain you. The difference is not accidental. It's systemic. In every room, there are players, and there are mirrors. Mirrors reflect, players calculate. If you're always reflecting, you're never strategizing. If you're always explaining, you're never watching. You don't have to lie, but you must learn to filter. You speak when it serves you. You withhold when it protects you. Give people a version of yourself that is simple enough to digest, but incomplete enough to protect. Let them assume. Let them fill in the blanks with projections. A projected identity is always more useful than a known one. Speak in shapes, not lines. Answer with meaning, not detail. Let your tone do more than your words. People are terrified of gaps in clarity. They will rush to fill the silence with their own story of who you are, and that story can be sculpted if you never confirm or deny. Design an outer layer that protects the inner mechanism. This isn't deception, it's armor. Machiavelli advised that rulers must learn to appear virtuous, even if they are not. Why? Because perception shapes reaction, and reaction shapes control. The more predictable your image, the more invisible your depth. So wear a mask of your own making, not because you're weak, but because a weapon hidden is a weapon feared. Let people see what disarms them. Let them feel close while knowing nothing. You don't need to be fully known. You need to be strategically misunderstood. Because when no one can read you, no one can reduce you. And when no one can reduce you, you become what Machiavelli revered, a presence cloaked in mystery, feared not for what is seen, but for what might exist behind the silence. You think opening up builds trust, but in the mind of a strategist, it's always a test of control. Intimacy is never a gift. It is a calculated exchange, a measure of what someone is allowed to see and what they are never permitted to touch. Real power lies in treating emotional access as a privilege earned, not a default setting. The weak hand their mind over for the illusion of closeness, the strong hand over nothing, and watch who stays. Most people confuse comfort with safety. They think familiarity means loyalty, but closeness without boundaries is just exposure wrapped in affection. They tell you love requires transparency, but transparency without strategy is a self-inflicted wound. People say they want to know you, but what they really want is to locate your center of gravity so they can tug on it when the time comes. They want your stories, not to cherish them, but to sharpen them, to use them when you least expect it, to reshape them in their favor. Every secret shared is a potential lever. Every vulnerability given too soon is a tool waiting for the wrong hands. You think you're bonding, but you're just handing over the keys to your inner fortress. People don't read you to understand you. They read you to edit you, to fit their needs, to reshape your mind into something manageable. Treating intimacy as a right is like leaving your kingdom's gate open and hoping no one walks in with fire. This is the law. Audit emotional access. Every time you feel the urge to share, pause. Ask yourself, what will this cost me if it's turned against me? What does this person do with silence? Because the one who grows restless in your silence cannot be trusted with your voice. Emotional minimalism isn't cold. It's tactical. You don't starve others because you fear connection. You starve them because too much access is a debt you will eventually pay in regret. So ration the real pieces of yourself. Let others build their version of you based on fragments. Fragments can be replaced. But when someone holds your whole picture, they don't need your permission to redraw it. Withhold as a form of structure, not to punish, but to protect. Machiavelli advised, reveal only what cannot be used against you, because the minute someone knows what breaks you, they will eventually break you, not because they're evil, but because survival will demand it. And you gave them the map. Let them call you guarded. Let them call you distant. Let them wonder. Because when no one holds your emotional center, no one holds your power. You are not cruel for keeping yourself hidden. You are clear. Clear about what love without boundaries becomes. Manipulation dressed as care. Control disguised as closeness. So no, intimacy is not a right. It is a slow, ruthless test. Give nothing until they prove they can carry it without turning it into a weapon. And even then, give less. The man who is always understood is always predictable. And what's predictable is controllable. People say they want authenticity. What they really want is consistency. A fixed version of you they can label, box, and manage. Unpredictability is power. When your moves can't be forecasted, your presence becomes unnerving. When your motives are unreadable, your silence becomes loud. They crave patterns because patterns make people feel safe. But power doesn't live in safety. It lives in uncertainty. From the moment you enter a room, they're already assigning roles. The polite one, the dependable one, the emotional one. It's how they reduce you, how they strip away your range until you're just a function, not a force. But when you defy that role, when you act outside the script they wrote for you, you don't just confuse them, you destabilize them. Because once you are fully understood, you are no longer seen as a threat. You become familiar, predictable, easy to calculate, easy to contain. That's why clarity kills intimidation and routine kills respect. But when you are unreachable, when no one can trace your thought pattern, decode your emotional rhythm, or predict your next move, you become dangerous because no one knows where to strike. Fear often begins where understanding ends. The unknown commands attention. It sparks caution, distance, even admiration, not because they trust you, but because they can't locate the boundaries of your mind. A known person is a solved equation, but an unreachable one? That's a question no one wants to answer wrong. So you break the pattern. One moment, warm. The next, silent. Today, agreeable. Tomorrow, detached. Not out of emotional instability, but as deliberate design. Because unpredictability isn't chaos, it's strategy. This is how control shifts. Not through force, but through confusion. Never let them think they've figured you out. The moment they do, You stop being respected. You become expected. Here's how you fracture the pattern. First, break your rhythm. If you're always calm, show volatility once. If you're always blunt, speak in riddles. If they expect silence, give clarity. They expect honesty, give suggestion. Let them wonder if today is the day you change. Second, shift your emotional cadence. You are not obligated to react the same way twice. Shock them with restraint, disarm them with indifference, or burn through them with precision when they least expect it. Keep your reactions asymmetrical. Third, make your presence inconsistent. Not your value, not your discipline, your accessibility. Disappear when they seek comfort. Return when they expect distance. Be the ghost in their emotional routine. Machiavelli warned, never let your enemies or your allies predict your next move. Surprise is the shadow of power. Because when they can't map your behavior, they stop trying to shape it. They pull back. They tread lightly. They whisper instead of demand. And that's the space where power enters, not as volume, but as silence, wrapped in unpredictability. Be the variable, not the constant. Because once you're constant, you're captured. And once you're captured, you're no longer feared. You're just familiar. They told you loneliness is weakness, but solitude is where the mask finally drops. When no one is watching, you stop performing. When no one is validating, you start refining. And when no one is applauding, you remember why you began? To be powerful, you must learn to be unknown, not just by others, but by the parts of yourself that still crave recognition. The need to be understood isn't about connection. It's about fear. Fear of being unseen. Fear of irrelevance. Fear that silence means erasure. But silence is not erasure. It's evolution. And the ones who evolve don't do it in front of a crowd. They do it in the shadows, where the feedback loop is broken, where the performance dies and the clarity begins. Most people move to be seen. They speak to be heard. They share to be approved. Every action becomes a mirror, waiting for reflection. But reflection creates dependence, and dependence is the opposite of power. When you're alone, the noise stops, and what's left is your real signal, not the one shaped by response, but the one shaped by strategy. Machiavelli didn't write for applause. He wrote for control. He didn't seek crowds. He observed them from a distance, because power requires perspective, and perspective requires silence. Solitude isn't emptiness. It's filtration. It's where you separate what's useful from what's performative, where you stop explaining and start designing, where you stop chasing understanding and start cultivating unpredictability. If you constantly need others to witness your journey, you are already lost, because their perception becomes your compass. And when perception guides your movement, you serve their expectations, not your power. So withdraw deliberately, not out of bitterness, but out of calculation. Here's how. First, train emotional detachment, not numbness. Control. Learn to sit in discomfort without expressing it. Learn to think without announcing it. Emotion becomes leverage only when it is invisible. Second, create spaces where you are unseen. You don't need to post it. You don't need to announce it. Do the work in silence. Let your growth become so internalized it becomes untouchable. When you do important things without recognition, you learn which actions are driven by conviction and which are driven by vanity. Third, let your mind evolve without echo. If every idea you have requires confirmation, you'll never hold a thought that contradicts the herd. The most dangerous minds are not the loudest. They are the ones that grew in isolation, shaped by intention, unmoved by applause. According to Machiavelli, you must become accustomed to standing alone, because power does not walk in crowds. It walks in silence. It sharpens in distance. It arrives when the world has forgotten you, and you no longer care, when you no longer fear being misunderstood. You stop negotiating your identity. You stop explaining your moves. You stop performing, and you start ruling, not from a stage, but from a place no one can trace. It's not your friends who understand you the most. It's your enemies. They pay closer attention. They listen without kindness. They remember what you forgot you said. The more you try to be understood, the easier you become to manipulate. Because manipulators don't care about who you are. They care about how you can be controlled. They don't need to like you. They don't even need to believe you. They just need to map your emotional terrain. What angers you? What softens you? What makes you retreat? What makes you speak? And they wait. There's a dark irony in being deeply understood. Only those with intention bother to study you that deeply. And intention, when it's not pure, is always predatory. You think you're confiding. You think you're being authentic. But they're listening like a surgeon listens to a patient, not to heal, but to cut with precision. Your fears become entry points. Your ideals become buttons. Your past becomes a trap. While you pour out your truth, they're writing your cage. They smile, nod, remember everything, and say nothing, because silence is the space where leverage is built. This is the paradox. Friends hear you. Manipulators read you. They track patterns. They time your reactions. They test your loyalty in whispers and watch how fast you answer. The more predictable you are, the faster they calibrate. They tailor their praise to your ego, their silence to your need for approval, their demands to your fears of rejection. And because it all feels so personal, you don't realize it's strategic. So you talk more, explain more, reveal more, and they use less, speak less, hide more, until one day you wonder how they got so close to your center. And the answer is simple. You gave them the map. To stop being controlled, you must become unreadable. Here's how. First, fake your tells. Don't just hide your vulnerabilities. Create false ones. React to what doesn't matter. Ignore what does. Let them believe the wrong patterns. Let them track shadows while you move in silence. Second, disguise your strengths as flaws. Act unsure where you're decisive. Appear soft where you are sharp. Let them think they found your weakness when all they've touched is a decoy. Third, speak in misdirection. Say things that sound vulnerable but reveal nothing. Layer truth with contradiction. Let them feel like they've earned your trust while never touching the real substance. Machiavelli said, "He who wishes to be obeyed must know how to be obscure," because clarity invites interference, but obscurity forces hesitation. Manipulators don't thrive in darkness. They thrive in predictability. So corrupt their perception. Feed them confusion. Let them aim at the mask while you remain behind the veil. When no one can read you, no one can rule you. The final form of power is silence. Not because you have nothing to say, but because no one deserves to hear it. Mastery doesn't speak. It moves. Without warning, without approval, without explanation. True mastery is not being understood. It's being unexplainable. A presence that slips through interpretation. A force that exists just beyond comprehension. You're taught to express, to share your intentions, to make yourself visible and clear. But clarity is a leash. Once the world understands you, it begins to shape you. Interpretation becomes limitation, and what is understood can be softened, redirected, or broken. Power doesn't live in noise. It lives in detachment, in the refusal to offer the world an easy definition. Because once they can define you, they will dilute you. The world is addicted to overexposure. Every emotion broadcasted, every opinion explained, every motive justified. But the ones who rule, the real architects of outcomes, speak less, show less, and leave interpretation as a weapon, not a weakness. They let others guess, because guessing creates hesitation. Hesitation creates distance, and distance creates respect. They design their image not to be known, but to be observed, mysterious enough to be talked about, ambiguous enough to never be cornered. In silence, there is space. In space, there is fear. And in fear, there is control. Machiavelli advised, "The wise appear simple, and the simple appear wise. But the truly powerful remain unreadable, because when no one can explain you, no one can predict you. And when they can't predict you, they don't try to control you. To operate at this level, you must become a shadow strategist. Here's how. First, speak less, even when you're certain. Certainty is not for broadcast. It's for execution. Let your silence become your edge. The less you reveal, the more they wonder what you're hiding. And that doubt gives you room to maneuver. Second, exist behind veils. Don't announce your moves. Don't define your purpose. Let your actions be visible, but your intentions invisible. People can't block what they don't see coming. They can't counter what they can't name. Third, make your presence unsettling, not by aggression, but by ambiguity. Show up where you're least expected. Say what no one can decode. React in ways that reset their assumptions. Be rhythm without pattern, presence without explanation. Power is not about being loud. It's about being precise. And the most precise instrument is the one that moves without noise, strikes without warning, and leaves no trace of intention. Don't strive to be understood. Strive to be felt and feared. Not for what you are, but for what you refuse to reveal. Mastery is the art of being too complex to reduce, too silent to decipher, and too deliberate to chase. Let the world keep guessing, because the longer they try to figure you out, the less time they have to defend themselves.